Bob Herbert's OpEd.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. Believe it or not, there's one area of national policy on which Democrats and Republicans seem to agree, and that's voluntary national service programs. These are programs in which men and women of all ages, but often young people, engage in activities that provide an endless variety of benefits to local communities. Volunteers can help with disaster relief, anti-poverty efforts, literacy programs, environmental initiatives, and on and on. I'll talk about these programs and what might be ahead for them with my guest, Ann Maura Connolly, president of Voices for National Service, a coalition committed to expanding opportunities for national service here in the United States. Ms. Connolly, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
So what would you say to someone who had never really given much thought to national service? What would you tell them that it was, and why would you say it's a good thing?
Well, national service has so many benefits for the folks who serve, as well as for the communities they serve, as well as for our country. Folks that participate in AmeriCorps serve usually full-time for a year, sometimes more than 1 year. They do a variety of different types of service, from serving in schools to serving in community organizations to assisting with disaster relief. And they earn a living stipend during the course of their term of service. And then when they finish their term of service, they actually receive a scholarship that they can use to help pay back student loans or pay for further education. Folks get really on-the-job training, if you will. It's a great pathway to work. They develop skills, they develop networks and relationships, and they contribute in really meaningful ways to their communities and to our country. And I think it really ignites in everyone that I've ever met who served a sense of civic spirit and passion for improving their communities and for doing the right thing.
What exactly is AmeriCorps, and how large is it? How many people are participating?
So AmeriCorps is a program that is funded by the federal government. And unlike other previous iterations of national service, AmeriCorps actually invests in nonprofit organizations around the country, many that you've heard of: City Year, Teach for America, Habitat for Humanity, Public Allies, and some that you haven't, small local community organizations. Those organizations raise money from the private sector to match the federal investment, and they're the ones that recruit and deploy and train and supervise the folks who serve. So it's a very devolved system, and it's worked really well because it's able to be nimble and meet community needs in just a whole variety of ways. I had a friend that once used to call it a Swiss Army knife because it does so many great things for the country.
So now your organization is Voices for National Service. It's not actually part of AmeriCorps. So explain what you guys do and what your relationship to AmeriCorps is.
So Voices for National Service is a coalition of organizations that host AmeriCorps members and run AmeriCorps programs. And we work together to educate leaders about why the federal investment makes sense, what the return on that investment is. We help to make sure that they understand the decisions that are made in Washington, the impact of those decisions on the ground in their local communities. So we work together to really advocate for the federal investment in national service. We also do a lot of work around understanding voter views on national service, building the case for national service. We did a cost benefit study a couple of years ago. So really, we are the outside voice of the national service community, and we work really hard to try to make sure that folks understand why this investment makes sense for the country and all of the great things that are happening on the ground.
So we talked a little bit about the kinds of things volunteers do, but can you give us some examples in more detail of the kinds of efforts that these national service volunteers have been engaged in.
Sure. So quite a number of AmeriCorps programs serve in high need public schools around the country um, where folks are disproportionately impacted by generational poverty, supporting students, supporting teachers, ensuring that they are staying connected to school, helping them develop both social, emotionally, and academically. There are quite a number of AmeriCorps programs that provide support through schools. AmeriCorps also does a lot in the way of disaster response and relief. When there are fires in California, for example, when there are tornadoes in the Midwest, AmeriCorps members are often some of the very first boots on the ground helping communities respond and recover. There's a tremendous amount of work that goes on in supporting homeless individuals, helping to build temporary shelters, making sure they get connected to services. So it's really a wide range of community needs. And the beautiful thing about the system is it's able to respond to local needs. It's not a sort of top-down program. It really does, communities can use it to help address whatever the needs are that they think are the most acute.
So if someone were involved in disaster relief, for example, so let's say you mentioned the fires out west. I imagine if there had been a hurricane or something along those lines, what kind of organization would they be part of, and how do they get the call to actually respond to these disasters?
So there are a number of different organizations that do disaster response. One is called the National Civilian Community Corps, and that organization is actually run by AmeriCorps, by the federal government, and they have teams of AmeriCorps members that are deployed to short-term projects around the country. And then when a crisis hits, whether it's a hurricane, a fire, a tornado, they're deployed immediately to the scene of the crisis, and they provide support to those communities addressing it. There are also conservation corps, fire safety corps, disaster response corps around the country and local communities. And when they're not responding to disasters, they're working on other community projects, but they're ready and trained and ready to go to be deployed the minute that a crisis hits.
I think that there are an awful lot of people, maybe most people in this country, who are not really aware of the wide variety of national service programs, or even that there are national service programs. Why do you think they don't get more attention?
Well, I think AmeriCorps increasingly is more well known among young people. More than 1 million people have served through AmeriCorps since its inception in 1994. But because folks serve through local nonprofits, I think it's often not well understood that they are AmeriCorps members. They're associated with the nonprofit through which they serve. But I think there's a lot that we can do to be telling the stories of folks who are serving, helping people understand why AmeriCorps matters, the difference that it's making. We have a ways to go on that, but I think that increasingly young people are looking at AmeriCorps as a really viable option, either before university or after university, or maybe even taking a year off in between their university career. And so I think there's a lot more we could be doing. It's helpful when the media covers the good stories about what AmeriCorps is doing in communities. And we are trying to leverage social media more than ever before now to help get the word out about opportunities to serve. But there are more people that want to serve than opportunities to serve at this point. So we also need to keep our eye on that.
So when we think of national service, I think most people think that this is sort of an area that's the volunteers are primarily young people. But as I was doing my due diligence and reading up on this, and after talking with you, it's not just young people, even though maybe the majority are young people. But who makes up these volunteers? Where do they come from? Who are they?
Well, most AmeriCorps members are young people serving really between the ages of 18 and 30. But there are also programs that engage older Americans. So there's an AmeriCorps Seniors program that is made up of 3 different programs that were created actually well before AmeriCorps: foster grandparents, senior companions, and the retired senior volunteer program. And those programs engage retirees. More and more people are retiring young and looking for ways to make a difference and contribute to their communities. And oftentimes they find that through serving in one of these programs. Um, it's a wide range of folks at all socioeconomic levels. You've got folks who have worked in corporate America and folks that have been teachers, and what they find purpose and passion in giving back in later years. And increasingly, more and more retirees are looking at these programs and looking for opportunities to serve through them.
Now you touched on this, but I just want to explore this idea that the volunteerism works both ways. The benefits to the community and to individuals should be obvious when the volunteers are helping out in these wide variety of ways. But there are also, from almost everyone that you speak to, tremendous benefits that come from the people who do volunteer. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, if you think about young people coming out of school, oftentimes they may have had a summer job, but they haven't really had an opportunity to develop professional skills. And National Service Programs gives them the opportunity to do that. In addition, they create networks. So they are, building social capital through their service. They're getting to know folks in fields that they're interested in, and that often helps them in their job search post their service career. And I think the other really meaningful way in which National Service offers value is by connecting Americans with widely different backgrounds. We think about, folks, we all live in our bubbles, right? Our social media
Right.
bubbles, our bubbles in our communities. National Service gives folks an opportunity to sort of link arms, roll up their sleeves together and figure out how to work together for the common good. And I think that really does build unity in communities and as a nation.
I spent 2 years in the Army a long time ago. I was a draftee. I was not anxious to go into the Army, but it turned out that those 2 years had a profound and very positive impact on my life. And one of the aspects, I grew up in North Jersey, and I was familiar with the Northeast. But one of the amazing things about being in the military was that, I met people from down south and from out west and from Alaska, and it was just really interesting. You're learning, and you don't even realize that you're learning. You're getting along, and you don't even realize that that you're getting along. So this idea, I'm very much in favor of this idea of sort of throwing people together and having them work together and live together for a while. You wrote a book about volunteers. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was the book about, and what did these volunteers have to say to you?
So I did. I've been at this for a while now, trying to help folks understand the value of AmeriCorps and of national service in general. And what I've often found is that the most compelling way to pique folks' interest is to tell them stories about folks who served. I've heard many, many stories over the course of the many years that I've been doing this that are really compelling narratives about what national service has done for the folks who served, as well as for the communities they've served, the difference they've made in the lives of students they've served, or the skills they've developed in that's helped them go on to find meaningful mission-driven careers. I've heard many stories of veterans who've come back after their service and are looking for a way to continue being mission-oriented and focusing on helping support their communities, and they found that way through national service. And so what I wanted to do was put together a collection of stories that help people understand, sort of help bring to life what the concept of AmeriCorps and national service is. And that's why I decided to put the book together, because I could have written volumes of stories, unique in their own way, about folks who've served. Thankfully, for readers, I only wrote one volume, but really, the universal thing I heard from folks was that serving through AmeriCorps seniors gave people a sense of purpose and passion, and helped them really actively engage in civic life and build connections with one another and build unity among people. And I was really inspired by all the folks I spoke with during the course of putting that book together. I myself served through the Jesuit Volunteer Corps right out of school, and it was a life-changing experience for me. And I thought, there've got to be many, many more stories to be told about the difference these programs make in folks' lives. And so that's what I was hoping to do, was to tell those stories.
Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, I guess the primary point of Voices for National Service is to expand opportunities for national service in the United States. And this is kind of a strange question, but why do you want to expand these opportunities? Are there unmet needs that you think volunteerism can meet?
Yes, absolutely. So if you think about any area of interest that young folks might have, whether they're thinking about going into teaching as a career, or they're thinking about going into public health as a career, there's an opportunity for them to put their passion for whatever that area of interest is to work to serve in their communities. And I think that if we had universal voluntary national service, this would be a very different country. Folks would not be as polarized as they are. Um, Folks would be able to develop skills, to develop experiences that can help them in their careers, and our communities would be more connected. There are so many needs. I mean, just thinking about coming out of the pandemic, so many needs, whether they're in public health, helping students get reacclimated to school, ensuring that folks who are food insecure have access to food. There's so many needs coming out of the pandemic that we could, dramatically increase AmeriCorps and still have needs that need to be met. So I think there are real opportunities for us to help our communities think about putting citizens at the center of solving problems by expanding AmeriCorps and giving more folks the opportunity to serve.
You anticipated my next question. You mentioned the pandemic, which we are coming out of, thank goodness. What happened with national service during the course of the pandemic? What was it like? Was it hampered by the pandemic, or what was the response?
Well, like everything, it was definitely complicated trying to pivot to pandemic
I'll bet.
service. But AmeriCorps did it beautifully and nimbly and quickly. I think about, when schools transitioned to virtual, teachers needed support more than ever to be able to help manage breakout rooms and different technology platforms. And AmeriCorps members were there at the get-go and stayed connected to their students, made sure that they stayed connected to school and engaged in their studies, kept their cameras on during classes, et cetera. And I think there were many other examples of setting up mass vaccination sites and supporting contact tracing, a whole wide variety of public health supports. And AmeriCorps pivoted very quickly to help communities respond to the pandemic and stayed engaged. And little known story, food banks were really hampered by personnel problems because most of the folks that serve in food banks are older adults. When the pandemic was raging, older adults who were potentially more at risk didn't want to be out and among folks, and so AmeriCorps very quickly pivoted to support food banks by providing additional boots on the ground for that. There is a bipartisan effort underway in Congress to expand AmeriCorps even more to help the communities and the country rebound from the pandemic. It's called the CORE Act, and it's co-sponsored by a bipartisan group of senators led by Senator Coons and Senator Wicker, because they really looked at AmeriCorps and said, "Hey, this is a great way for the country to respond to the pandemic, and at the same time give young people an opportunity to be part of helping the country respond and recover."
We're so used to the partisanship in the country right now that it's really almost odd to hear that there's a bipartisan effort underway for anything. Do you think that this the current effort will bear fruit? Are you optimistic about that?
I'm very optimistic, and the reason is because there is such strong, solid bipartisan support for expanding these programs, for engaging folks in service to help the country recover. This is the thing we can all agree on. I've never seen such strong bipartisan support for anything, and it crosses all sort of walks of life. Governors are supportive, senators are supportive, members of the House are supportive. So I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to really get something done.
Now, you mentioned that these volunteers, most of them at least, that they get a stipend and they also get educational benefits. But I don't think anyone's getting rich off of national service.
Absolutely
So,
not.
so give me a sense of what the stipends are like and how national service in general is financed.
So the stipends are really a wide range. They're meant to be living stipends so that, you know, as you say, nobody's getting rich doing national service. They're meant to help meet basic needs. We are looking at ways to increase those supports for young people, particularly may not have additional economic backup. But it is meant to be a living stipend, so you know you're getting by for a year. The educational benefit is actually pegged to the Pell Grant. And so folks, as the Pell Grant increases, the scholarship also increases for AmeriCorps. The federal government invests, as I said, in nonprofits. The nonprofits are required to match the federal investment with private or other support. And so they're out there engaging companies, foundations, community foundations, and individual supporters. But you can't run an AmeriCorps program on just the federal investment. You've got to actually raise additional resources to help support training, supervision, et cetera.
One of the concerns I've heard going back many years about national service and other voluntary programs is that people are worried that they would take employment away from people who need it. Can you address that issue? Is that a valid concern?
It's not really an issue. When AmeriCorps was created, there was, in the original statute, there was a prohibition against displacement of workers. So you can't actually replace workers with AmeriCorps members legally. And so the way we think about it is it's really helping folks create pathways to careers. These are not jobs. Folks don't stay in these jobs for many years on end. They might do 1 or 2 years of service and then move on with their career. This is really an opportunity for folks to sort of get that first experience that can help them decide what they want to do with their careers and then build the skills to help them get there.
So actually, it enhances employment opportunities.
Absolutely. And in fact, we see many employers that look at AmeriCorps members and say, these are exactly the kind of folks that I want in my organization or my company. They're mission driven, know how to work with folks that are different from them. They get the job done, and they're whatever it takes orientation.
Now, if someone, for example, viewers of this program, wanted to become involved in national service, but doesn't really know how, what advice would you give? How can you volunteer?
Well, AmeriCorps.gov is a great place to go to look at all the various different types of programs that are out there. It's the federal government website, and it connects to all the websites of the various AmeriCorps programs around the country. And there are just many, many, many different options. So this is a little bit of an outdated metaphor, but I like to say, if you have an interest, there's an app for that with AmeriCorps. You can find a way to build skills and to put your passion to work through AmeriCorps programs, doing many, many different things.
Tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, you've become so immersed in this issue. How did you get into volunteerism or the issue of national service? Why did it seem so compelling to you?
So when I was a senior in college, I went to a Jesuit college, College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I was really unsure what I wanted to do. I was a political science major. I just didn't feel like I was ready for jumping into the world of work right away. And I saw a very small advertisement. Back in the day, we had things called campus newspapers that were not online. They were paper. And I saw an ad for the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And I went to the information session, and they had me at hello. I just was like, this is the greatest idea. I moved out to California, spent a year out there. I was definitely jumping into the deep end. I worked in a center for immigrants and refugees, providing support to folks that had just moved here in a wide range of different ways. And it really captivated my interest. I really sort of felt like, wow, this has been such a life-changing experience for me. Imagine if every young person had the opportunity to do that And so when I discovered that there was a sort of fledgling group of organizations that were working hard to try to inspire the creation of AmeriCorps, I thought, this is my purpose. This is what I want to do with my life. And so I've been at it ever since. I still believe deeply in it. I'm as inspired by the idea today as I was back then, and really believe that it can make a huge difference in our country, and that it already has. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to dramatically expand it.
We've been speaking with Ann-Maura Connolly, president of Voices for National Service. And to our viewers out there, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.